My wife's name is Mary.
I first met Richard Easton.
I first met Norm here.
After he met me, he had this whole sort of epiphany.
It was from a woman explaining to Joel that she was his daughter.
And she looks up and says, Bill, what did you do?
Everything was sort of a little bit explosive.
And I said,
Father said, can you beat this guy?
And then he immediately turned his back on her and was just like, really?
We sat together for the last probably 18 years, I guess.
I was never the same, ever.
my name is Deb,
My name is Barbara.
Bill,
Gina and Dharmesh.
My name is Robert.
and I'm one of the lucky ones.